as I said a second ago, I'm just so excited to have Kara with us today. I've gotten to work with her a little bit this year, and each time I've been impressed not just by what she knows, her deep understanding of the research behind these ideas, but with her willingness to share and the passion she brings to everything she does that helps us support teachers and helps us support learners as we grow our community together. For those of you who don't know her, she is many things. We were just chatting about all the things she's taught, and she said it's just too much to mention, but we'll say she's had a lot of experience in the classroom. She's been a coach at elementary and middle. She's worked at the district level supporting teachers and sites. And of course, also is a road warrior out there helping systems across the country to expand student ownership of learning and do other great work. She is an author. She's written some books you might want to check out: Partnering with Students, Building Ownership of Learning; Clarity for Learning, that's 5 essential practices that empower students and teachers; and of course, Pure Power, just available now through Mimi and Todd Press. And you're gonna learn some of these great things that she shared in some of these books and beyond as we move on. So as always, we want you to keep in touch with us. You saw how you can get in touch with her on Twitter. Also, these are the ways you can get in touch with us. If you don't have time to catch them all right now, do a screenshot or follow up. You can watch the video later and you'll see. While you're at it though, join our facebook.com group, Leading Impact Teams. That's a place you'll see updates about these webinars and other events. And with that, I'm so excited to hand this over to Kara and have her share about how we can make a huge difference in students' lives, not just when they're in our class or in our school or in our system, but when they're out in the world well beyond their schooling years.
Well, good evening. Hello, everybody. I'm so excited to share this with you tonight, and I very much appreciate the Core Collaborative asking me to do this. This topic is near and dear to my heart, and it's also something that I have seen have an enormous impact in schools that I work with around the country. So it's pretty exciting, and I'm going to be sharing some of their work with you tonight. Our big learning intention for tonight is that we want to learn about really building students' efficacy as learners. And so in terms of success criteria for this session, we're going to focus on some of the hidden beliefs that students hold about themselves as learners. We're also going to talk about transforming our language in order to change the way that students focus on learning and their definition of what success looks like in the classroom and what it means to be a good learner. And then we're also going to talk about how we can impact their beliefs and develop a way of thinking and doing that really promotes both motivation for students, but also their self-confidence and their efficacy overall. All right, so we'll get started. One of the things I wanted to ask you as you're listening in is, have you ever noticed how beliefs really underpin our actions? And what we found is that when students are young and they first come into school, they're so excited to be in school. They're so excited to be learners, and they have an incredible curiosity. But as kids get older, it tends to shift. So I wanted to start us off with just a quick little video clip that kind of accentuates how students' mindsets are often when they enter school.
I feel.
Do you feel alive?
I feel happy of myself.
I feel happy of yourself too. What do you got, any words of wisdom? What about for all the other kids trying to learn how to ride their bike? Can you say anything to them?
Everybody, I know you can believe in yourself. If you believe in yourself, you will know how to ride a bike. If you don't, you just keep practicing. You will get the hang of it, I know it. If you keep practicing, you will get the hang of it, and then you can get better and better at it if you do it.
Give me some thumbs up.
Thumbs up, everybody!
All right.
For rock and roll!
All right, so as you can see, this little guy came into school with a very high level of confidence, and he has a growth mindset, and it's incredible. But I put some statistics up on the screen, and these actually come out every year. And the interesting part is they haven't really changed, but these are statistics that come from the Gallup student poll that's done every year. Sometimes people call this the Hope Study. And essentially it asks questions of fifth through 12th grade students. And in that, it asks them about their level of engagement and their hope for their future are two of the questions. There are a few more, but these are two of them. And I highlighted these two because, as you can see, there's about 50% of kids that feel engaged, 29% feel not engaged, and 21% say that they're actively disengaged. And the scary part is it really connects to the hope that they have for themselves as learners and for their future. And so you see almost the exact same numbers for their hope that they have. And it's interesting that 34% even say that they're stuck and 18% feel discouraged about their future. So what we found is that this is a major trend. It's a trend across the United States, but outside of the United States as well. And we really need to do something about it. I was one of those kids as well who maybe didn't have the best start to school, and I harbored those beliefs about myself for a long time until people started to actually impact the way I saw myself as a learner. And it's still hard at times with those certain beliefs to not think that that's the case. And our learners are no different. And so we want to really do something to make sure that our kids aren't walking around thinking that there's something wrong with them. And what we've also noticed is that when they're in the classroom and they struggle with something, math, reading, writing, whatever it is, science, they automatically think that something is wrong with them. And they internalize that as somehow they are less than. The truth is that if they're truly learning, they should struggle. And struggle is part of learning. It's also part of building our efficacy. And if we don't help kids see that as a positive, we are really creating a situation where their self-esteem, their self-concept is being deteriorated for absolutely no reason at all. And so we want to try to impact this idea for kiddos so that they don't walk away thinking, I'm not good at school, I'm not interested, I don't want to take a risk, I don't want to do my homework, I don't want to be here. And we see a lot of fear of failure behaviors manifested out of that. If you've ever heard in the classroom, I don't want to do this, this is stupid, or you see kids putting their head down, or you see kids, not wanting to take the risk. A lot of that behavior comes out of that fear of failure and the fear of not being good enough. And so we want to change that paradigm for students, and that's a huge goal. So what we know from the research that's really interesting about motivation and self-efficacy is that students can be taught to think differently, more positively. We can also make sure that we focus on progress. And if we focus on progress, and I'm going to show you some examples of how to do that tonight, but if we focus on progress rather than comparison, competition, or achievement, we can make a huge impact. And the truth is that achievement never happens without progress. And even competition without progress isn't worthy of our time. So we really want to focus in on that piece. We also know that kids have to see relevance in their work and have goals that are theirs, and they have to see the need for this in their life. We also know from the research that if kids see mistakes as opportunities rather than something innately wrong with them, that we also are going to help build their self-efficacy. And then finally, and this one is big, when kids have an understanding of the fact that learning is hard and they should struggle, they start to build confidence, they develop an internal locus of control. And what that means is they feel like they have the skills necessary to navigate life, to reach goals. And it becomes less about, well, I got a C in that class because that teacher just doesn't like me, or it's not my fault, it's somebody else's. They know they have the skills and they start to internalize that, and that's a good thing. So I want to talk a little bit more about this idea of self-esteem and self-efficacy related to this, and do a bit of a comparison, if I may. So one of the interesting things about the research is that when we look at self-esteem, that's really about feeling good about oneself. And it's really hard to impact that as teachers and leaders. We can love on kids and tell them how much we care about them, but it doesn't really make that big of an impact on their self-confidence. However, when we work on self-efficacy, and you can see here, it's really that idea that they have the skills they need to navigate life and reach their goals. When we work on that, interestingly enough, that does impact self-esteem. It's just not the other way around. So we really need to think about self-efficacy as a game changer in our classrooms and our schools. And this is something that we are finding has a greater and greater impact on our students as well. One of the reasons for that, and this comes from Guy Claxton's book called The Learning Power Approach, which I highly recommend. He talks about this idea that if you look at the diagram on your screen, that in the classroom, there are all these subjects that we're teaching that are on the surface: history, art, science, English. And in those, there are knowledge and skills and literacies that students have to navigate and figure out and learn. But underlying that are always the attitudes and dispositions toward learning, how they feel about learning and themselves as learners. And so unless we address all of those things, we really are going to continue to have issues with will toward learning, motivation, and student self-confidence. And so that's kind of a great way. I love that diagram to kind of look at that idea. In addition, I love this quote from the National Association of School Psychologists about feeling good about oneself matters, but the best way to help children feel good about themselves is to provide them with opportunities to learn what their strengths are and help them cultivate the belief that they can rely on their strengths when faced with a challenge. So we need challenge seekers is what we need out of our students. So we're going to talk about some different strategies we can do to get there. But before we do that, I want to share what happens when people have high self-efficacy, because I also think that this can have a profound effect on our school culture and on our students' just lives in general. So as you can see on the screen, I mentioned the internal locus of control already, but if you notice some of these other things, that it increases motivation toward learning when kids have high self-efficacy. It can counteract stress and burnout. It can even, if you look at the bottom of the list, counteract anxiety and depression. And so that's pretty incredible that this could have that much of an effect. In addition, it increases their satisfaction of their situation and learning and just how they see themselves, as well as their sense of well-being. So we're seeing this as a huge area of focus. And to connect to the visible learning research, John Hattie's research, if you look at the screen, you can see the barometer, and a 0.40 equates to about a year's worth of learning in a year's worth of time. And if you're not a big research person, don't worry about it. Just know the 0.4 equates to a year's worth of growth in a year's time. And you can see that self-efficacy is a 0.71. So if you're wondering, like, would it make sense to do this when we have other things we've got to focus on at school? Would it really make an impact on achievement? And what the research is telling us is that it not only will keep kids at a year's growth of learning, but it'll actually accelerate it far beyond a year's growth, almost to 2 years growth in 1 year's time. So to spend our time working on self-efficacy with our students would be not only beneficial for their lives, but it also will increase our achievement overall. And I love this as well. So many teachers talk to me about, oh, my kids just aren't motivated. They just don't want to do this. And I the more I learn, the more I read, the more I research, the more time I spend with schools that are engaged in this work, the more I know that that's not the case at all. And I love this quote because it says that still it is true that when an individual gains or maintains self-efficacy through experience of success, we're going to talk about that more, however small, they generally get a boost in motivation. And they continue to learning and making progress. So the cool part about this is that each little success breeds a desire for more success, and so on. And so do our kids know if they have been successful or have had a mastery moment? And they don't need to be big ones. They don't need to be graduated from high school or graduating from 8th grade. They can be something very small, like, I got it today. Today I got it. So we're going to talk about a couple of factors that influence and give us power to increase their self-efficacy. We know it's worth our time. We can see that. But now what do we do about it? How do we as educators impact this? So I want to talk about a couple things. One of the first ones is allowing students time and space to envision success. If they don't have a lot of time to do any kind of goal setting or dreaming or wondering or seeing even what other sick people's success looks like, they're very unlikely to go after it and really envision what it could be and what it could feel like. Another one is mastery moments. Mastery moments don't have to be these mountaintop experiences like winning the Super Bowl. They can be little tiny moments in the classroom where a kid has an aha, or they make a connection, or they finally figured out how to solve that chemistry equation. Those are mastery moments, and our students need to start seeing those as something to honor and celebrate, and we need to start doing the same for them. Another one is vicarious mastery experiences, and this really applies to their peers. So when students see another kiddo just like them, and they go, "That's my friend," and that my friend just did, you fill in the blank, whatever it is. My friend can write like that. My friend can solve those kind of math problems. My friend can do those kind of art projects. They have a vicarious experience, and they internalize that as a little confidence booster. And they go, okay, well, if my friend can do it, or if that student can do it, they're not really that different than me. I can do it too. And then finally, feedback messages. And the feedback messages we send are super powerful. And we can talk about a little bit about what those could be that really can make an impact on students. Finally, if those things are in place, we get kids on what we call an upward spiral. And they're just excited every little mastery moment, every other moment where they get good feedback to move their learning forward. And then maybe they have a vicarious experience, and then they get a little time to dream about what their project could be or how they could accomplish their next goal. Each of these things will get kids onto an upward spiral. And that, in fact, is hugely powerful in motivating them on to the next step. Rick Stiggins once said at a conference I was at, and I just loved it. He said, our job is to get every kid on a winning streak and keep them there. And this is how we get kids on winning streaks. And I'm going to show you, like I said, some of the practical pieces. But before I go on, I just want to check in. Are there any questions right away in the chat before I move too far?
We don't have any questions right now. We've got a lot of people sharing some of their own experiences and how this is really resonating with them, not just for what they see in their classrooms and schools, but in their own work. Actually, I take that back. We have a question. This says, how do we get the learner to understand that their mastery moment doesn't necessarily need to be compared to their peers?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm going to share some things here in a second with you that will provide some ideas, I hope. I've put together some examples and some things for you guys. But one of the things is it's a culture building piece for the classroom. And it's not just a culture of like, we all love each other, let's all learn. It's a culture of kids really understanding that learning is a process and that we can make progress through that. And as kids start to learn that idea that you're going to struggle, and a lot of people use the learning pit from James Nottingham's work as an analogy, like, oh, I fell into the learning pit today and it was so hard. And whether you use that or something else, kids start to learn that they have to do that. They have to go through the struggle. And they also start to learn that different kids are in the pit at different times for different reasons, and that's just okay. And so one of the ways that we can share that with kids is by letting them see the progress of others, and they start to realize that different people have progress in different places. It takes a little time, but let's see if some of these ideas will give you some things to go on. And then if not, email me, and I have a few. I'm thinking through a few more that I don't have in the PowerPoint, of course, tonight, but I'm happy to share them. So you can feel free to email me after this and I'll give you a few more ideas. All right. Well, let's keep going then, and then I'll stop again in a little bit.
Excellent.
So I want to kind of propose a few things, and this is something that these mastery moments and this idea of building student self-efficacy has been a huge game changer for me. And I love this idea from Lynn Wernham. She says, we got to start focusing on building specific self-efficacy perceptions rather than outcome expectations. And we get so hung up on how well did you do on the quiz? How well did you do in 8th grade? How well did you do in kindergarten? Can you read yet? All of those things that we're forgetting that there is this idea of self-efficacy that actually will propel them further faster if we can focus on those smaller things. So I love that concept. And so I want to talk about this idea of, well, how do we get to know what our kids are thinking and what they're believing? So the first thing is we need to do is we need to ask. And there are tons of ways to do this. What you see on the screen is a survey that could be given to middle or high school kids for sure, even maybe upper elementary, to find out, like, what do you believe about yourself as learners? And you can see things in here like, I seek evidence to determine if I'm reaching my goals, things like that. Are kids seeing that as part of learning? So a survey is a super easy way. You can do written responses. This is from, I believe, a 2nd grader, but written responses, you can do little video interviews on your phone and just ask kids, like, what's a good learner? Do you think you're a good learner? What do good learners do? What do they do when they get stuck? And just start to find out what kids will say. What's really surprising is that on initial inventory of students, what we found is that a lot of our special education students actually have a more growth mindset than any other group. And one of the reasons for that, and this is just anecdotal, of course, but one of the reasons for that, I think, is they know what it means to struggle. They've done a lot of struggling. And so they know we just got to get them out of the struggle and have some mastery moments more often. But it's our high performing students that are struggling. They're like, I don't want to struggle. I want to get an A. Just tell me how to get the good grade. And we've programmed them a little for that. So we've got to really work on that. And we've got to find out what they think. And it's interesting. We've also done small focus groups, done that with high school. And that's also really good for primary kids because they do a little better talking in a little small group. And the things they will tell you are amazing. But a lot of kids will just talk about compliance behavior. You listen to your teacher, you ask questions, do your homework, get good grades, you're smart. That's what makes you good at learning. And this example that I have on the screen came after a whole year of a school working on what does it mean to be a good learner. And if you kind of read through that, the student is saying, what good learners do? They wonder ideas. And then he goes on to say they try that idea and see if it went right or wrong. They connect to what happened, and maybe they connect it to a book or a story or from their life, and they solve a problem, and they try it, and if it doesn't work, they try again. And so you can see the mindset of this student is different, and this is not by happenstance. This has been taught to students. And as we saw at the very beginning of this, the research says we can have an impact here. We can teach this language of learning. So once we do that, we've surfaced some beliefs, we've interviewed some kids, we found out what they think. We want to start to change the way they think into something more positive. And so this is called in the research, if somebody is interested in this, and the research is often called dispositions toward learning or learner dispositions. You might have read Art Costa, which he calls habits of mind. He also has a book on dispositions, which is excellent, by the way. So it gets called a lot of different things, but essentially, and this comes from Ron Richart's book, he says, learner dispositions are the mechanisms by which we bridge the action ability gap. And he goes on to say, and I think this is powerful, he says, it's more than a desire, inclination to act. Dispositions involve values, beliefs, underlying temperaments, awareness of appropriate actions, the motivation to carry on, and the requisite abilities and skills they need to perform. And what's interesting about this is that it brings up two pieces. We can teach kids the language, but we also have to pair that with those mastery moments and those moments of success and be super clear with kids about what success looks like. So we're going to talk about that a little bit too. So another idea here is that our messages are powerful. And I brought this up with the feedback piece that connects to building efficacy. When they hear messages from us, especially if it's all of us, if all of our staff talks a certain way and acts a certain way and believes a certain way, it is incredibly powerful. And John Sapier, in his book, High Expectations Teachings, he says that students need to hear that we believe in their capacity. They need to be surrounded by an environment that sends these messages at every turn. They need to know what you're doing is important, that you can do it, we believe that, and that we're not going to give up on you. And then I love this last piece. He says, these messages don't get sent by osmosis, cheerleading, or signage. So don't put the pretty poster on the wall only. We're going to do a little bit of that, but don't put that out there and think that that's sufficient. They get sent through everyday behavior, what teachers say and do. And that's really what we are talking about. Is the first thing we do is we change our language and we teach them a language. And so what many schools have gone to is defining a language of learning and saying, what are the things, what are the dispositions that we really wish our students had, or that they shared they wished they had? When we sat down with a focus group of high school students this past year, they struggled very much to tell us the things that they could do. And surprisingly, when we asked and asked, they just struggled and struggled. And they finally came up with this like group think moment where they said, you got to communicate. And they all said, oh yeah, that's it. And then when we said, well, what are the skills you wish you had? They could talk and talk and talk, and they informed us about all these things they felt like they weren't good at, or that the skills that they didn't have. And it was upsetting to all of us in the room, because I think I think that same conversation could be had in any school around the country, because the kids are internalizing struggle and not learning something on the first day as something that's deficient. So the school that I is sharing this example from, this one happens to be a middle school, but they started to kind of get a few words together. And I would suggest maybe 5 to 7 key words and phrases that really have to do with what we want our students to do when they're in a learning situation. And then what they did is they defined it. So they picked perseverance here, and they said, I can keep trying even when it's challenging. So they gave a little definition. And then they have some look fors. And again, this is just teacher brainstorming at first. We can formalize it later, but you can see that some of them were created in that black marker, and then another team wrote in the green marker to say, actually, we'd like you to add this one. And so once this is done and shared with students, students can give feedback as well, and we can come to a language of learning and a way of doing that kids can really use. And in fact, that's what they do. They use those look fors to help kids self-reflect at the end of learning experiences, or even during, and say, which of these learner dispositions did you use today? And if a kid says perseverance, okay, great. Which of the look fors did you use, or would you add a different one? And the kids might say, well, I kept trying and I didn't give up, or I tried a different strategy I never tried before today. All right, awesome. So they have this awareness that these controllable things, going back to that locus of control, these controllable things are actually things that I can do, and I can do them every day at will, and it actually helps me with learning. And they start to put these ideas into their toolbox and into their confidence in terms of how they see themselves. Like, I'm a kid who perseveres, that's what I do. And we start to see the mindset change, we start to see behaviors change. So the next piece
and
is
right there, I just want to say, while you keep going, with that in mind, if you're on Facebook Live, or if you are on in the Zoom with us, that might be something to share. Is what is some of the language that you're using in your school, or some of the language that you wish you were hearing more of in your school? And you can just share those in the chat,
awesome.
Share them in a comment. And thank you so much, Kara. This is so exciting, and there's so much passion in these comments that people are sharing, but there's a reason, because you're just making it so clear how this impacts everything, not the learning today, but everything.
It does. And speaking of that, I think that's kind of one of the next layers for schools, is to then teach this language. And there's kind of 2 layers to that: teaching it explicitly first, And then also just implicitly making it part of what we do. And so you can see some examples on the left. You have some ideas of how kids can change their thinking. If they're thinking one way, then I want you to start thinking another way. If you start to say, I can't do it, I'm going to ask you to say yet at the end of that sentence, for example. I can't do it yet. And the idea here is that in the brain, when kids have that negative loop going, they start to create superhighways of thinking that are very negative. And if we can impact that, that's where we have the ability through building their self-efficacy to impact things like depression, because they aren't going to spend all that time thinking those negative thoughts and creating those negative thought superhighways in their brain. Instead, we're going to help them change that, and we're going to help them see the value of the moments when they struggle or make mistakes and make it okay, and understand that error actually makes us learn more. And all of you listening, I'm sure, myself included, I would say that the moments when I was a hot mess and when things did not go well are the times that I probably learned the most. And I saw the most change out of myself, because I was like, I do not want to see that happen again. And so that's one thing I would recommend. On the right, another school used famous failures. And these are like free video clip. There's video clips on YouTube that are free. And it's just really interesting for the kids to hear things like, Michael Jordan didn't make his 9th grade basketball team. Walt Disney was told he lacks imagination. Oprah Winfrey was told she wasn't good for television. The Beatles were told they're not good at making music. I mean, there's just so many things that we need to start to counteract how kids think. And they know, if they know that people that they admire have had these same negative messages, and yet they triumphed, or they walked right through that and proved people wrong, it's just good. It's just good for kids to know. So any way you can authentically do that for your age group of kids and for your classroom is what we would recommend. And then it just needs to be infused everywhere. So if you see the screen now, we've got these kids sharing examples of how they persevere, and they have these for all their different learner dispositions. Here's a student who drew their own learning pit. And the teacher in this classroom, I love this, because the teacher in this classroom has the kids, the learning pits out, and they're laminated, and the kids actually point to the place where they feel like they're at in the learning pit. And then the teacher asks them why, to be self-reflective, and then they start to problem solve their own situation. And then they can also recognize those aha, eureka moments when they get out of the pit, which is pretty exciting. And then also just asking kids or listening to the language. So another school is just listening for the language of learning to be used by their students. So collaborate was one of their words that they've been teaching kids about, and that was a really good learner skill. And so this kid says, can I collaborate with my partner to help me learn, help me climb out of the pit? Yes, please do. That'd be great. So this is another one. And I love this because a lot of the teachers are starting to provide a what do you do when you're stuck wall to teach kids explicitly some skills for getting unstuck. And I picked this one. I really loved it because this is from an EL teacher. She teaches English language learners in the primary grades. And so if English language learners in primary grades can learn how to get unstuck all by themselves, that's pretty powerful. And not that the teacher's not there, but it's just, we want kids to stop just sitting back and going, I'll just wait for my teacher. No, I want you to use some skills. I want you to get some skills so that you can get unstuck. And so I just love that they're doing that. And I've seen these all the way up through high school being used. Some of the unstuck walls I've seen have formulas on them or different resources kids can go to. Some of them have created some online resources for the getting unstuck. It's pretty exciting work. But again, we're teaching kids that stuck is a good thing and that it's just a next step in their learning versus, well, I must not be smart. I'm not good at this. So I want to share this and then I'm going to take a little break and ask for some questions after this. So if you've got one, maybe thinking about sharing that with Isaac. But this comes from Guy Claxton. It's one of the articles he has. He's got several books out and we're not as familiar with him or James Nottingham in the US because they're British, but I promise they have amazing accents and they're really, really smart people who've done a lot of research. So I encourage you to check them out. But Guy Claxton, he put together this framework, which I really love, about sharing dispositions with kids and the way that we have to think about it. And so I just want to go through this just a little bit, because we want to go from that explicit teaching to infusion in every learning experience, because this is how we learn. And so it doesn't need to be separate. It should be, hey guys, today I'm gonna throw you in the learning pit. It's gonna be a hard day, but you got this, right? So get your learning partner, let's go, and really just be using the language all the time. So he says, one of the things we have to recognize when we teach kids about dispositions of learning is that learning is so much bigger than just thinking. It's like, it's about collaboration, and it's about resources, it's about struggle. And so we have to understand that this requires time for kids to learn, and it requires experiences for them to base this understanding on. And so if it's kept separate, they'll never learn it the same way than if it's infused in every classroom, just the way we do business. And then the other piece is, the next one is, it's dispositions rather than skills. So if I say, well, I taught you perseverance on Monday, so therefore all my students will persevere at all times, and that's my expectation moving forward, it's a little unrealistic, because we still have kids, and I'm the same way. We all have things we're good at and we're more likely to persevere in, versus things we're not as good at. We're going to be a little bit more likely for some of those fear of failure behaviors to start bubbling up to the surface. And so we need to recognize that in our kids, give them opportunities to persevere, and find ways to help them get excited about the learning, and understanding that that's what we're supposed to do. So the next one really leads right into the next one, is capability rather than attainment. We're trying to build a capacity in our learners to persevere longer, to try another strategy, to ask questions, to connect ideas. It's a capacity building piece versus you got it or you don't. And we have to stop thinking about, like, this kid's just not a good student. He's just not really good for class. Like, he's not really made for school. That's just a lie. And we have to stop and say, this kid can be the best learner in the classroom if I give them what he needs, or give him what he needs to be successful. And then the last two go together. Infusion, like I mentioned, is critical. It needs to be infused in all classes and talked about. Teachers need to use the language all the time. And then finally, it needs to be school-wide. So this is something where it's not like one teacher, because what'll happen is that kids will share those dispositions and use them in that classroom, and then they'll go to the next classroom where that's not true, and they'll shut down. And so it won't pervade their person in the same way. It won't impact their self-efficacy in the same way as it could if it was based around, this is the way we learn at this school. This is how we do business. Every teacher, every classroom, every day, every kid. So I'm going to pause there and see if we have any other questions or comments.
Here's one from Stacy. So one of the things she uses with kinders is, I think I can.
Oh, yeah.
But she really was curious if you have some other ideas for early learners, K1, 2, some phrases you use in those levels.
Yeah, I do. And I'm glad you brought that up on a couple of accounts. One, the first thing is, you made me think about using literature, because there's a book that goes with that idea. I think I can. The little engine that could. But some of our schools have engaged with their librarians to develop a list of resources and to buy books that really teach these different dispositions. And they use these books a lot. And the librarians have become a huge help to classroom teachers to find these resources and teach this language of learning. The second thing I will say, I'm glad you brought this up, is that we love, as teachers, words like cooperate and collaborate and perseverance, and all that is great. But what we have to do is find language that sticks with our kids. It's sticky. And if we try out words like cooperate, and the kids are like, whatever. I don't even know what that word means, even after we try to define it and work on it. We have to change the language to something that's very student friendly. So what some of our schools have done is they've introduced the concept, like, I think I can, love that, with their kids. And then they've worked on naming the category of what does that mean? And they might name it like, keeps going, keep going. They might name it perseverance. They might name it something like persist, a little shorter. They might, there are lots of ideas, but what I would encourage a school to do is develop their language and then really include the kids in that so that the language works for them. And the kids are funny. They'll come up with stuff on their own. I had a middle school that talked a lot about the failure pieces, the same one that used the famous failures. And that school talks about epic fail all the time. They're like, oh man, epic fail. And then the kids' next thing is they say, what are you going to do about it? And it's just become the way they talk. So for kinder, words like wonder, question, think, are really good. Give it a go is another favorite. We don't use that as much in this country, but it came to us from our friends down under. They talk about give it a go all the time. But I would really encourage your school to include kids so that it is a student-friendly language. And then other words can be used as synonyms or part of the look fors. So all that language development around that idea is never a bad thing. But I agree with you 100%. I wouldn't post cooperate and persevere and all that in a kinder classroom. It's probably not going to have a big effect. So,
Awesome.
yeah.
Thank you. That was powerful.
You bet. All right, well, let's keep going here. So we've talked a little bit about the language, and now I'm going to hit on a few of these pieces next, kind of connecting back to these things that impact self-efficacy. And so a couple of them are this idea of envision success. So one of the things we need to do with our students is be extremely clear with them, not only what we're learning, and the US, we're pretty good about the learning intention or target, but the success criteria is big. Kids need to know what success looks like. And it needs to go beyond, this is an awesome beginning. This is from a middle school classroom also, but an awesome beginning. And I love when I look at this, they're doing a project with a book they've been reading, but I love it that it's not about the project. This is about the learning. If you look at those success criteria, they're exactly what we want kids to learn. And that's what we want our success criteria to represent. And then the next piece is we've got to pair them with examples of student work. So this one's a little messy, and I apologize. I'll probably get in trouble for putting a messy slide together, but it's important. So let me explain it to you. So this is from a teacher I work with named Valerie, and she wanted her kids to do a better job at explaining their science experiments when they were done. She wanted them to be able to come up with like a real explanation of what's the claim you make, what's the evidence, what's the reasons. So what she did is she asked them to look at 3 different pieces of student work. And this works K-12. So if it's kindergarten, look at other kindergartners writing, especially ones at the toward end of kindergarten to see, look, you might not be writing like this yet, but you will be soon. Let's look at what's good. Oh, they use punctuation, they use end marks, the sentence makes sense. So you can do that with anything, but in this case, they pulled 3 science examples. And you can see one of them at the very bottom of the screen is 1 sentence. So that's probably not the exemplar or the best example, and then there's 2 others. And the kids had to, in small groups, had to talk about what was good about each one. And then what you can see in the Venn diagram they did is that the ones that are highlighted in yellow became their success criteria. And the goal with this idea is that if you ask yourself, who in the classroom is doing the thinking in this scenario, it's the kids. And that's the goal of sharing criteria with kids. We can give them a list and say, this is what I want you to do, or this is what success looks like. But when we take the time to show them what it actually looks like, and they build the criteria with us, even though we know it ahead of time, they automatically understand it better. And one of the things I want to share with you is the why behind that. This idea of sharing not only success criteria, but adding the idea of exemplars, examples, works along the way. the first thing is it provides a coat hanger for their surface knowledge, that what they already know, and it links to their prior knowledge, and it creates a place in the brain for prior knowledge to grow into greater knowledge. The other piece, though, has to do with that I think is important, is it has a lot to do with motivation. And if you'll notice, the things that increases, kids are more willing to engage in the task, so we see motivation increase. They see the importance and purpose. They have a higher level of confidence and less anxiety. And the fact of the matter is they trust us more when we show them ahead of time what success looks like, because they know we're not going to pull the rug out from under their feet. We're like, this is what I want. No, really, it's what I want. This is what we're doing. And then the next thing is that they have, at the very bottom, it says, it creates a higher probability of them reinvesting in future learning. So if we have a motivation issue, this is a huge counteractor to that piece. And then once we do, they need to know their mastery moments. And so this comes from an elementary classroom, from Anna's classroom. And she's given the kids a little road in math, and math is super sequential. So it works really well for this. If you try to do this with reading, you'll probably pull your hair out, but it works great for math. And so she has a little place where the students started, and if you know, or the goal that is to get to that star. And for this group of lessons, and you can see the cars are along the way, and then the kids are getting smiley face at each checkpoint. Each checkpoint happens to be a success criteria, but they're having little mastery moments on a daily basis to know that they're making progress. And that's what we want, whether it's high school, middle school, or kindergarten, doesn't matter. We want them to know those mastery moments. And then what I love about this is she has this box on her tables, and she has a variety of different little exit slips, if you will, or little self-assessments, but they are a variety of different levels. And so the kids can choose what they feel like they're ready for and do a little self-assess. They give it to her at the end of class, and she can quickly see where her students are, what they're choosing to challenge themselves with, and what they need in terms of next class instruction or intervention. And she's seeing huge growth in her students just because they have some choice in this. It's very motivating. And also, they're seeing these little mastery moments, and they're putting evidence together over the time, like the couple weeks that they did this unit. They're putting evidence together that they've got it. So they don't even need a test. She may give them one, but they don't even need it. They know, I've got it. Let me show you. I can prove it to you. And when you go into her classroom, that's how they talk. So she's setting it up so they have mastery moments on a regular basis, and they also have friends having mastery moments.
That's amazing how it all pulls together with something
Yeah.
as simple as that.
It
all
is.
that thinking, all that language, all
Yeah.
those lessons about learning. And
So
then how do you
simple.
make it real? You have a little bit of choice, and you have something authentic that then you can reflect
Yeah.
back on.
Exactly. It's so cool. It doesn't have to be complicated.
Mm-hmm.
This is a little checklist from some of the schools, I believe, in New York. And I love this because, and you can see these on the Core Collaborative website, but they're learning to give feedback to each other. And they're also engaging in seeing other kids writing. And again, they're having vicarious experiences through their friends of what success looks like. And they're getting to also give powerful feedback messages to their friends. And so by doing this, you're hitting several efficacy factors right away by giving kids the opportunity to peer and self-assess. And the other reason to do this, we found in the research, this comes from Graham Nuttall's research. He has a book called The Hidden Lives of Learners. And in that book, they mic'd students and listened to their private classroom conversations. And one of the things they learned was that 80% of the feedback that kids receive in a day is from their peers. And 80% of the time, it's wrong. Which is, we all go, oh, that answers a lot of questions, actually. But the truth is, when we give kids the criteria like you see on this checklist, and when we show them in student examples what success looks like, and we show them examples of what does it look like to tell the setting, what does it look like to use the character's name, what does that sound like, and we give them experiences like that, they become really good at giving feedback, and they are very knowledgeable, and much more so than if we just let them have that conversation willy-nilly at their desks like they would anyway. but they need to be our partners because they're giving and receiving feedback anyway. It's just without us, it's not as good as it could be. And then finally, I love this little chart. This is in a middle school I work with, and I love that they are asking them, what are we trying to learn today? Why? And then on the right-hand side, they have a little scale. And I like the language on this. It's, I'm a novice, like I'm new at this. I'm an apprentice, I'm learning. I'm a practitioner, I can do it by myself. And I'm an expert, I could teach it. And a lot of classrooms are starting to use experts in different criteria to help provide feedback for students who need a next step in learning or need some work on, and really thoughtfully pairing those students together. And you can do that with their knowledge or without their knowledge. They don't need to know why that they've been paired with whoever partner they have the next day. And if the partners change regularly, nobody knows the better. But anyway, and then they also are using this to require the kids to give an explanation of their learning and really working on the explaining. They also have a high English language learner population, wanting to give kids the chance to explain. And then also the chance to ask a question when they don't have to raise their hand in front of other kids. And so this little sheet might look very simple, but it's designed to be extremely supportive to learners. Acknowledge mastery moments, acknowledge questions, that type of thing. And when this happens, the exciting part is we get kids on the upward spiral and we start to see them engaging more, we start to see them more excited, and we start to see that these efficacy factors are having an influence in the classroom. And there's a million ways to do it. I've just shown you a few. But I encourage you to think through these factors and really think about how we can promote those things in the classroom, both through a language of learning, but also a way of doing, because these things do have a huge impact. And one of the reasons they do, this again comes from the National Association of Psychologists. There's this relationship between the skill and the will of learning. And we see it all the time in the classroom, but we may as well acknowledge it. And these two are inextricably linked. Kids need to improve in both areas to build self-efficacy. So we need to work on self-belief. We need to focus learning and show them what success looks like. And we need to help bring their anxiety levels down. And then on the flip side, we need to give them success and we need to show them that they know something and help them assess their prior knowledge, but also help them grow and like acknowledging, like, I got this little piece. Now I know this. Now I know this a little bit more. Now I know a little bit more versus, can I pass the big test? All right, so I have a challenge for you from being a part of this webinar, and that challenge is to take a little bit of time yourself to envision success and imagine what success would look like in detail. Because if you want to build that belief, if you want to build something different than what you feel like you have right now in your school or your classroom, you've got to take a little bit of time to think about what that might be and let yourself dream and imagine a little bit, and then make it happen. So with that, I have a quote I'm going to leave you with, and then we'll take a few more questions. But this is what my hope is. It says, the world today needs students ready to take on worthy and challenging goals, to fail, to get up, to fail again, and to persist until their goals are realized. We need students who see challenge as an invitation rather than an impassable roadblock. We need difference makers, legacy builders, and world changers. We can be that for them so they can be that for others. So thank you so much, and I'll take any questions you might have.
Awesome, yeah. And anybody who has any thoughts or questions, please share those, excuse me, as comments on Facebook Live or in the chat on Zoom. And while we do that, I'm going to share a few things that we have coming up for you. And then anything I see, I will share it to Kara.
Cool.
So if you'll click down for me.
Yeah.
We are continuing these master classes, third Thursday of every month. We're very excited about the rest of this year's lineup, which is going to be exciting, great variety, focusing in on science, really looking at dignity and equity, digging in deeply with math, and then working on the art of questioning, which works into everything Next month, of course, is that making the shift using science storylines for 3D learning. That's going to feature two of our amazing authors and consultants, Jason and Kristen. And we'll keep clicking through. There's something powerful about these sessions, but there's at the same time, there's something to be said for getting there face to face. And you can see throughout the rest of this year, we are somewhere near you. You can check these dates out at thecorecollaborative.com and find out more information. The next one we have in line is in Brooklyn. And if you'll click again, Kara, you'll see that, hey, there's some familiar faces. There's Kristen and Jason. You can work with them in person and with their amazing colleague, Eric, really digging into how can students learn science in a way that mirrors the way science is actually done and actually learned out in the world. One more click for me. We are so excited about Mind-Fueled 2020, moving to a new location, keeping all these great things that have worked, but making a fresh start as well. So please check it out and join us in Vail. We've got an early bird special running for you, so check that out at thecorecollaborative.com. And then one more click, as I mentioned earlier, it is time to begin the Peer Power Revolution. You see Kara's smiling face right there alongside Paul and Barb. They and 10 other authors have collaborated to share a vision for what it means to empower students to really own their own learning and to activate an assessment revolution so that assessment is done for students and by students and with students, so that we can all do these things Kara's been sharing with us. We can internalize these ideas and take them out into the world with us. I see a few more questions popping up, and we'll be happy to follow up with you about those. Kara, do you have any closing words for everyone?
No, I said go give it a go. It can't get bad. You know, it can't be better than giving it a try. It's going to be awesome, and please tell us about it. And if I can support you in any way, let me know, and I can definitely email you, or you can email me, and we can start a conversation. So
awesome. If you'll click on just one more time or two more times, I think here you can check out a little bit more about impact teams, and then one more click. We'll close with this. When you want to share your story, you're accepting this powerful challenge from Kara, here's some ways you can share with us. Hit us up on Facebook, share a picture or a video on Instagram, check our YouTube page if you want examples of this happening out in classrooms and out in schools and systems. And then, of course, please follow and tweet to us at The Social Core. We really appreciate you taking your time this evening to spend with us from all around. And we hope that you'll join us again next month. As always, thank you for sharing your two most valuable assets, your time and attention, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.